Joining us, he does each and every single Wednesday to talk all things SEC football. Our good friend Jake Crain of Crain Company, as we look back on a wild Week 7 and turn our attention to Week 8 as well. Jake, appreciate you taking the time as always, my man. What's going on?
Always love hopping on. It's the weather could not be. This is my favorite time of the year.
Football weather.
Football weather. You're getting that crispy coldness in fall. We were talking about on Crain Company yesterday. Is fall the best season? I just don't know how it's not. Like I like spring. I got nothing against spring. I don't hate the others, but man, fall's got to be the best.
Fall hits different. Leaves start turning, like you said, that briskness in
Mm,
the air. Oh, yeah, peak football weather. That being
for
said,
sure.
Jake, we had some peak football over the weekend. Let's dive into it. Let's start with the game that happened in Death Valley, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. LSU with the come-from-behind win. Garrett Nussmeier connects with Kyron Lacey in overtime to beat Ole Miss. Jubilation on one side, LSU, right? We knew this was kind of not of a playoff eliminator, but certainly one that the paths look very different now. Your takeaways from what you saw in LSU Ole Miss and what it means for both sides.
Well, starting on the LSU side, obviously it's a huge win, and it kind of felt like Ole Miss controlled the game throughout until the end. Which, look, it's a zero-sum game in this sport. You either win or you lose. It doesn't matter how you do it. It just matters what the result is. A lot of people obviously are talking about Nussmeier and offensively what they were able to do at the end of the game, and then in overtime hitting that big vertical route on the first play, just shooting a three with the hand in the face when it matters most and making it. But to me, I think the story of that game was LSU's ability to tackle in space. I know Bentley hit him with that 50-yard touchdown run, and Jackson Dart was really effective running the ball, whether it was quarterback design runs or kind of creating and getting out and scrambling. But I thought for the most part, LSU was very disciplined defensively. And discipline isn't just scheme. Like it's not just knowing who to cover, but it's gap integrity. And when you get a chance to turn a guy back inside where your help is, you turn him back inside. They're doing the things that the LSU defense hasn't done a lot of in the past. They just relied on athleticism or ability to get a ball carrier down, as opposed to boxing a ball carrier in, boxing a receiver that has caught the ball in and letting help arrive, which prevents 10-yard catches from turning into 50-yard touchdowns for the most part. So if LSU, with all the detrimental injuries that they've had on defense, and it seemed like for the first 3-4 weeks, they'd have a big-time player go down for the rest of the season on that side of the ball. If they can continue to do that, and you got to give Blake Baker credit, this LSU team, to me, becomes more dangerous than the LSU team last year. Not because the offense is as elite. Nobody thinks that, and nobody's saying that. But just like being a good gymnast, winning football games is about balance. Balance keeps you on the beam, and the teams that win the most win in the most ways. And if this defense can continue to do the little things right and understand how to play team defense, the offense is good enough with the players they have to put up enough points in really every game they play. But Chris, we got to see if it can continue. Like I know we'll probably get into the Arkansas game, but I need to see LSU continue to do this defensively before I just say, "Oh my God, guys, we found a cure."
Blake Baker, for the time being, Jake, definitely looks like he was worth every single penny that they're paying him, maybe then some as well, because to your point, night and day difference from a season ago. Jake, I want to jump to that game in Knoxville. Tennessee beats Florida in overtime. I wasn't surprised it was close, Jake, because I feel like this rivalry, I mean, you think about it, that was Tennessee's fourth win over Florida in the last 21 years. But it's kind of lather, rinse, repeat, Jake, to the convo you and I were having last week about getting fun back into the Tennessee offense. And I don't think Nico and the gang's having any more fun this time this week going in the game against Alabama. What'd you see? I mean, Florida, obviously, you can talk about them and the blunders, and it's kind of just the same old, I think, with Billy and some of the mistakes they made. But, more importantly, I've seen a lot of chatter this week about Nico, the scheme, and how it's more just lack of execution. Like the opportunities are there. They're just not connecting right now.
Yeah, well, you look at Florida and they couldn't stop they couldn't stop runs if you gave them a gallon of Pepto, yet they were able to kind of shut down Tennessee for the most part in that game. Not saying Tennessee didn't run for any yards or anything like that, but they weren't able to hit a lot of explosive plays. And the irony of this Tennessee team to me is just crazy. And the football gods are so fickle. Tennessee built this movement up offensively hoping that the defense could just hang on enough years for them to be able to build an army on defense that is not only talented and deep enough to be able to withstand how fast they go on offense and be willing to say, you know what, maybe we can win a couple defensive games. But the fact now that they finally have that defense and they have the depth on that side of the ball, but the offense is what's screwing up to the point where they're not even really going that fast anymore. That they're not being able to push the pedal to the metal. You know, the Oklahoma game, we were like, hey man, look, Tennessee, you're not always going to have your best offensive night. The offense isn't always going to be clicking. We see this in basketball, we see this in baseball, and we see this in football. And on those few instances, you may have to win the game with defense and special teams and field position. But it seems like this is who just Tennessee is now. You look at Arkansas, you look at Florida. We've now had 3 occurrences of the same thing, which is over half of the games that they have played, which tells me this is more who you are now than who you aren't. So to me, Chris, when I look at Tennessee going forward, and if I had to diagnose what I'm seeing, and I've went back and I've watched the film because I couldn't tell if it was Heupel protecting Nico, was Heupel afraid to let him fly out of the nest, or was Nico afraid to fly out of the nest himself? And the more I watch, Chris, they are running combinations down the field, right? Not as much against Oklahoma because they really ran and hit in that game, which I thought was smart with the way the game was going, the way Oklahoma looked on offense. But you look at Arkansas and then you look at Florida, they're running combinations down the field. And Nico took a couple shots against Florida and had guys wide open and overthrew them. But a lot of times, Nico isn't pulling the trigger. I think it is more Nico than it is Heupel trying to protect him. I think it is more Nico than this offense saying, you know what? Let's just shut it down from a play calling standpoint, not push the envelope, not push it down the field. Now understand pace and scheme, right, are 2 different things. But Tennessee had combined both to be fast and dangerous in that vertical third and then take advantage of you with the run game, with the intermediate pass game. But it just seems like Nico, and to me, against Alabama, you can't play this game of hide and seek. They're too good offensively. It's like the FBI. You may get away at first. You may hide in Antigua for 3 months or 3 quarters, but eventually Jalen Milroe is going to find you. Ryan Williams is going to find you. Jeremy Bernard is going to find you. Jam is going to find you. This offensive line is going to be able to protect well enough and block well enough to put points on the board. So if I'm Tennessee, Chris, damn it, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down throwing my best punch. I'm going to go down swinging my sword. We're going to go fast. We're going to push the envelope. I'm going to tell Nico, let it fly. Don't be afraid to create. You don't need to just be a method actor. You can be an improvisational actor as well. You don't need to just prove to everybody that you're a pocket passer. Go let it all hang out. Let's dance with the one that brought us. And if we lose, at least we can lay our head on the pillow at night and know that we didn't run and play hide and seek. That's what I think Tennessee needs to do. And I'll be shocked if they don't do it this weekend.
Yeah, I think, Jake, to your point, they're going to have to. Nico's going to have that light bulb moment, come out of his shell and make some big plays. Alabama, South Carolina, 27-25 final. What do you take away from this from both sides? Because, again, Alabama escapes death, and I think South Carolina, that's probably one they feel like they should have had on the road.
Well, I want to start with the Alabama side, and it's still, Chris, and me and you are close to the same age. It's weird to watch Alabama bleed. It's still weird to me because I've watched Alabama monopolize the athletes on the line of scrimmage and in general and play disciplined football to the point where you knew what was going to happen before the ball was kicked. And the only way that Alabama would lose is if something fluky happened or there was a bunch of breaks or just craziness ensued. But now teams can just line up and beat Alabama, right? And you can blame the changing rules of college football or whatever. I think overall it's good for college football to not have one team that is, the Fortune 500 company and everybody else is just a bait shop on the corner, because that's what it seemed like. But from a personnel standpoint, Alabama's just not nearly as dominant, especially on the line of scrimmage, as they've been in the past. And teams can out athlete Bama to a certain extent. They can out physical Alabama to a certain extent. They can bully Alabama to a certain extent. And Alabama's really turned into a team that has really, really good skill position players, but they no longer have that domination across both sides of the line of scrimmage, which is where the game is truly won and lost. I don't care what level it is. I don't care what scheme you run. This is a line of scrimmage game, and it always will be. So Alabama still has a really good roster. They're a really good football team, but they can bleed now. What does it say on Predator or whatever? If it bleeds, I can kill it. That's what it seems like teams are doing now. There's no fear factor anymore for Alabama, right? You respect that brand, you respect that logo, but when Bama used to take the field, you knew an ass whooping was coming. They'll give it to you anyway, the slow way or the fast way. But now they're more normal. They're more muggle than they've ever been before. So Vanderbilt can push you around some. South Carolina can bully you some. And I can make the case that South Carolina lost that game. Alabama really didn't win it. And a lot of teams lose games, right? They don't win them. That isn't something that's new in college football. But on the flip side, if you're a South Carolina fan, I'm the first person to sit here and say, Chris, man, I love me some Shane Beamer. I think he's a genuine guy. I think he's a really good recruiter. I think he cares about his players, but this is a results-based business, right? If you just want all the other stuff, open up a nonprofit. You're getting paid too much not to win. And if you're a South Carolina fan, you look back on last year where you guys were so bad across the line of scrimmage, but you had Leggett, you had Rattler, you had Juice, right? You've had Jaheim Bell in the past. I know it wasn't last year, but it was before that. So the problem for Shane is there's nothing to look back on in year 4 and be like, see, I did it here. Let us rebuild and we're going to do it again. Right. So it's the proof of concept still has not shown itself on the field. And nobody has almost won more than it seems South Carolina has. But almost does not count in this sport. Almost does not count when you're getting paid millions and millions of dollars. And it is a big money business. It is a billion-dollar industry when it comes to college football. And moving forward, it's going to do nothing but get higher. So if you're a South Carolina fan, we can talk about Lenore Sellers going through these growing pains. Me and my brother disagree. I think he's still got a really high ceiling. He's just learning. I mean, really, Nico's still learning, right? Hawkins Jr. is still learning at Oklahoma. There's some young guys in this league. And I said at the beginning of the year with all these new quarterbacks, these young quarterbacks, you got to be a surfer as a fan. You've got to ride the wave. But it's got to be so frustrating for a South Carolina fan that at this point, you should be absolutely ripping the wave apart and winning surfing awards or whatever, trophies they get for that. I can't remember the name of the league, but you haven't, and the results just haven't been there. And you've had multiple opportunities. Game day comes to Columbia after you wax Kentucky and you lose to LSU. Ole Miss comes to Columbia coming off a loss. It's a big game. You get dominated. You go on the road and have a chance to beat Bama, beat a top 10 ranked Bama team, and really show everybody what's going on in Columbia. And yeah, it hadn't gone great early, but this is what we can do. And you lose the game because you can't hand the ball off right. It's just got to be infuriating. And I know Shane and them are pissed off too. I know the players are upset, right? And they should be. I know they care. I don't see a lack of playing hard at South Carolina. But at some point, man, at some point, whether you're a salesman, whether you're an accountant, whether you work as a janitor, or you're the head football coach of an SEC team, you got to show proof of concept, and there's got to be big time results, and they just haven't showed up for South Carolina.
Jake, a few things to unpack there. I want to go to the young quarterbacks. You mentioned guys like Sellers, Nico. I'd even go to a guy like Jackson Dart, who I know is or Jackson Arnold, Lagway. Do you think that maybe has this season kind of served as and I don't know if people will implement it going forward because we're prisoners of the moment and we'll let the hype get to us probably again, but should we have been more cautious in regards to, controlling the hype when it comes to these young quarterbacks? Because it does seem as if a lot of these growing pains are just kind of natural progression of a career, but I don't know. I think with guys getting on campus so early now and the hype around these guys starts so early, right? I mean, some of these guys when they're freshmen in high school, and I think with what the expectations NIL is setting on, and I'm not trying to run from expectations, but I think you make a good point from the standpoint of I wonder if going forward we'll kind of learn to temper our expectations a little bit more when it comes to these young quarterbacks, because I think what we're seeing right now, to your point, is not, it's not like these guys are terrible, and I think the ceilings are high for all of them. It's just welcome to the SEC as a redshirt freshman or a freshman quarterback. It's just not as easy as I think some people want to make it out to be.
Yeah, well, the SEC and high level college football is the closest thing to the NFL. So you are asking an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old or somebody who hasn't, and the game is so different than practice, right? You try as a coach to make practice as close to the game as possible. You make practice harder than the game so the game is easier, but it's impossible to truly simulate in-game action in practice. So you're asking an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old to go out there and be a superstar at the basically the highest level of football outside of the NFL around the globe, and you expect them to not make mistakes, or that it's just going to come easy. I'm sure you can go to Columbia Law School or Harvard Law for I don't know however many years it takes to be a lawyer. I wasn't going to do that much school, even though I love arguing as much as anybody else. But the first time you try a case, like if your first case is a humongous case and the next thing is the Supreme Court, you're probably going to have to there's going to be some ups and downs. So we see this in all walks of life. But Chris, to your point, I think one of the reasons the narrative has changed with young quarterbacks, because it used to be, listen, you want to play a young quarterback in this league, it's a death sentence. You might as well just chalk this one up to a learning experience season and hope that they learn enough that going forward they'll blossom into what you hope they are. But we've seen so many young guys have success, right? Not just in college football, but look at some of the young guys in the NFL. Look at what CJ Stroud did last year. So it's becoming more normalized for younger quarterbacks to have success. Therefore, the narrative and the expectation has been raised, and everybody wants their guy to be the best, right? Everybody thinks, oh, this young phenom quarterback we got, he's going to be the new generational guy. And it just most of the time, not every time, but still most of the time, there's going to be a lot more downs than there is ups, right? You just hope that it's even, that there's an even amount of ups and downs, and that these young guys make the mistakes once and learn from them. Not that you'll be perfect the rest of the way, but understanding whether it's a situational awareness mistake, whether it's a physical mistake, whether it's making the wrong read on an RPO or some sort of intermediate combination or combination down the field, or you're reading the numbers wrong pre-snap and you should have spit the bubble instead of handing the ball off on the RPO. Those are the things you hope they learn from. So, yes, overall, but I mean, Chris, asking people to to eliminate hype, like, or to tone down the hype, that's a tough sell. Look, fan is short for fanatical for a reason. But as far as the analysts go, I think some want to reach to get those clicks of this guy's going to be a Heisman winner as a freshman, as opposed to saying, look, there's going to be some good, there's going to be some bad. Maybe this guy will surprise us and he's more ready than we thought. But yeah, it does need to be tempered because it's really, really hard. Hell, when I was 18, God, can you imagine being Lenoris Sellers' age and they're like, hey, you going to play Bama, don't screw it up.
Take us to the promised land, right?
Yeah.
Jake, as we close the book on week 7, Red River Shootout, Texas dominates Oklahoma 34-3. How confident do you feel right now in saying that Texas is the best team in the country, or even minimum the best team in the SEC? This topsy-turvy year, there's maybe still some debate, but it feels like right now, from what we've seen, the Longhorns are the most complete team top to bottom.
So far, this weekend to me is the biggest litmus test because they're going to play a team in Georgia that can beat them multiple ways offensively. And you've got to obviously give credit to Texas for dominating Michigan and dominating Oklahoma and how physically superior they looked to both of those teams that pride themselves on physicality and do have really good players at a lot of spots. But we all know Michigan and Oklahoma can't throw the ball very well. Well, if we know that, Texas sure as hell knows that, and they're going to be able to take advantage of that. The paths to victory for Michigan and Oklahoma were a lot more narrow than what Georgia has. Now, I think Texas is a better team overall than Georgia. I don't think Georgia is what they have been the last couple years or the last 3 years, and I think a lot of Georgia fans will tell you that. Not that they're bad. They've got a really good roster, but it seems like they don't have the elite guys on both sides of the line of scrimmage that we've seen in the past, or at least they're too young to have stepped up yet, because there's a lot of young talent on that roster on both sides of the ball. But if we're going to talk about the most dominant team in college football, we have to talk about complementary football, and I'm going to go back to that word balance again, right? It's the teams that win the most, as I said, win the most ways. And we see this in college basketball a lot in the tournament. You're not always going to shoot the ball well. You got to win a game sometimes with rebounding, defense, and making free throws. And you look at Texas, they seem to be the most equipped offensively, defensively, and from a special team standpoint to be able to not dominate every game, because you're not, especially when the competition continues to get raised, but they can win a game 17-14. They can win a game 45-42. They can win a game making big plays on defense, obviously making big plays on offense, and they're pretty daggum good on special teams, which means your roster is really deep and talented. So this weekend, I think Texas has a chance, because I don't think Oregon or Ohio State wowed us with the overall team that they have. The offenses were really good, but there's obviously some holes there. It's a Camp Green Lake situation. But Texas this weekend, if they dominate Georgia and they look like they've looked all year, we have to say, all right, Texas has separated themselves, maybe not by an ocean's length, but by a river's length away from the rest of college football.
And Jake, before we get off that Red River shootout on the Oklahoma side, I know you want to take a moment to no, I'm just kidding, not to take your victory lap, but we were right on Oklahoma. You were right. We were right. There were a lot of folks that I feel like we sort of gave OU folks, great folks, by the way, but gave them warning coming into this first year in the SEC, and everything's come to fruition. I'll ask you this, Jake. Do you worry about Oklahoma long-term getting lost in the shuffle in the middle of the pack in the SEC? Because that's
No.
absolutely not what they're used to.
No, not at all. It's look, you're a victim of circumstance, right? Like that's every year. That's why I hate trends when people are like trends. Well, in 2002, this happened. 2002 has nothing to do with this team, like or this coaching staff. Every year is different. If you ever coached or played, you realize that a lot of things can stay the same, but every year is different. And where Oklahoma was coming into this season, like I sat here and said for a whole year to Oklahoma fans, was a different spot than where Texas is. And I would say the same thing if the roles were reversed. That's why I said over a 5-year term, I would want to buy Oklahoma as much as I would want to buy Texas right now. But on a short term, on a year lease, of course I would buy Texas right now. You'd be crazy not to. And their schedule is lighter than what Oklahoma's is. So listen, I'll never get mad at a fan base for thinking that their team is going to be awesome every year. That's what makes the SEC great. That's what makes college football great. That's what fills up those big ass stadiums. That's what buys people out of merchandise and hot dogs and beer and all this other stuff and tailgates that get set up on Tuesday of the week. We need that. But you also have to live in reality of you're not going to dominate every year. You're not going to be elite every year. And where this Oklahoma team is, and I sat there at SEC Media Days and I went on with, because Teddy Lehman and them were upset that I was like, listen, having a young quarterback mixed with a brand new offensive line is not a great situation coming into this league. And turns out you really should be 3-3, but Auburn just sucks and they find ways to lose games. So right now, Oklahoma's not like they're terrible or this program is just going to go down the drain because you're in the SEC. You've had problems at quarterback. You've had problems offensively. The defense, I think, has played pretty well for the most part. It's just at some point that dam breaks. So, look, I'm not going to – I could sit here and be like, told you so, ha, 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 ha. When you project and predict as much as we do in this business, you're going to get some right. You're going to get some wrong. We just happen to get more right than wrong at Crain Company because, again, I only know 4 things and they all start with F, and this is one of them. So, look, Oklahoma fans, keep being nuts. All right, that's one of the reasons y'all fit in so good at this loony house that is high-level college football in the SEC. But at least so far this year, it's looking like we were right because that's typically how it goes under the circumstance that Oklahoma was in.
So, Jake, looking ahead to Week 8 this weekend, Texas, Georgia is the feature game. They're in Austin. Texas, a 3.5-point favorite. How do you see this one shaking out, Jake? The thing that not worries me necessarily, but from the standpoint of picking the game, I feel like everybody's going with Texas. It almost feels too easy. I know Georgia has looked the way they've looked. I mean, last week, even against Mississippi State, it was ugly. But how do you see this one playing out? And I'll ask you this. Path to victory for Georgia, if they're going to turn back into the Georgia that we all expected, I mean, what does that look like? And again, what are you expecting from this game?
Well, there's always the main keys for each team that are obvious, and then there's some that are kind of under the surface that they need to do to put themselves in a position to win. The obvious ones for Georgia is you've got to stop the run. You've got to stop Texas's ability to run. You have to at least take one quiver out of, or one arrow out of Sark's quiver. You've got to make them somewhat one-dimensional, which is really, really hard because their offensive line's pretty daggum good. And look, this Georgia front seven is good, but they're not what they've had in the past. There's not a Jalen Carter there. There's not a Jordan Davis there. There's not a lot of records there. There's a lot of really good players. They're going to continue to get better, but there's not a lot of people that can just ruin your day, with one flick of the wand. But you beat them defensively as a unit, right? Everybody doing their job, being gap sound. If I got a two gap, damn it, I'm in a two gap. If I've got to fill the B gap, I've got to fill the B gap. If I'm running the J on the backside as a safety, I'm not going to get over aggressive and run and get over to the other side of the line of scrimmage. I'm going to wait for the cutback and I'm going to do my job. If you do that and you put Texas in 3rd and 7s and 3rd and 8s where you can pin your ears back and get after Quinn, you can slow them down somewhat. You're not going to stop them because Sark is going to find you because they do bastardized things from a route combination and a formation standpoint that goes against everything you're taught as a defense. And that's the best way to do it. Because if you're going to do everything by the book as an offense, well, we know what that is. You're going to line up tight to go wide. You're going to line up wide to take advantage of space and hit us tight. I always used to tell our guys on defense, if somebody's leaving, somebody is coming. They're doing that for a reason. So it's about playing disciplined defense and putting them in disadvantageous situations offensively. And maybe you can get to Quinn Ewers, right? Because if you don't, they're going to gut you. We saw that in Tuscaloosa last year with Texas. Quinn's jersey was as clean when he walked out as when he walked in. So that's point number one. And then number two, it's funny, it's the exact inverse. Georgia's got to find a way to run the ball. Like they've got to find a way to do it. I mean, it's kind of a Freaky Friday situation here. Texas is more like Georgia has been, and Georgia is more like Texas has been. Georgia is a pass to run team right now. And they may have to pitch backwards in this game. What do I mean by that? Throwing on 1st and 10, right? Doing things outside of the norm of, hey, let's run power, let's run counter, let's run stretch and get to 2nd and 6. Well, if you're not able to do that and you're living in 2nd and 8 and 2nd and 9, you're going to have to find ways to get in 2nd and 5, right? Because 2nd and 5 gets you into 3rd and 2. And you can make a lot of money in 3rd and 2 because the whole kitchen's open, let alone 2nd and 2 when you can really take advantage. So those are the main things. But to me, what's underneath, and something that's not going to get talked about a lot in this game, is special teams. And it's not just blocking punts. It's not just running kickbacks for touchdowns. Special teams is mostly about field position. Georgia's got to win the field position battle in this game. If they don't, they are going to lose, right? So when you get a chance to pin Texas back inside the 10-yard line or the 15-yard line and put them in a bad spot and make them go 9, 10, 11, 12 plays down the field, most likely that Georgia defense is going to get a stop. But if you're turning the ball over on offense, or you're shanking punts, or you're giving up decent kickoff returns and Texas is starting at the 35 or the 40, you're going to lose this game. So I don't buy into the fact. I was arguing with my brother yesterday on Crain Company. He's like, well, Georgia started this way against Alabama. I don't think Georgia is going to be a prisoner of the mistakes they've made in the past. Kirby's too good of a coach. His teams evolve as the year goes on, and they've got too good of players. So I think Georgia's going to come out and maybe even throw the first punch. But over a 4-quarter game, if Texas is able to run the ball and Georgia cannot, and one team is living in 3rd and 2 and the other is living in 3rd and 8, I don't see a way Georgia wins this game. But Chris, I came on the show after Georgia came back against Bama because they went up tempo in the second half and said Georgia needs to start going up tempo more. What did they do against Auburn? Right? And I'm not saying they listened to me. Mike Bobo saw the same thing I saw on the tape, and they went up tempo and it worked. Do not be surprised at all if Georgia gets the ball in their first drive and they go really, really fast. If you wipe your eyes and it looks like Tennessee, the color on your screen is not messed up. Georgia's doing that on purpose because that's been really the only way they can generate explosive plays.
Jake, let's go to the game at Rocky Top, 3rd Saturday in October, Tennessee and Alabama. This one's shaping up to be a classic. The spread in this one, I believe, is almost right at a pick 'em. Okay, excuse me. Bama's a 3-point favorite in this game, road favorite in Neyland. Neither one of these fan bases, Jake, I think is feeling all that great going in this game. How do you see this one shaking out?
Well, that's why I call it the Make Me Feel Good Again Bowl. Because, you think about the emotional roller coaster that both of these fan bases have been on the last 3 weeks. I don't have to tell you what's happening. You go from the highest highs to the lowest lows very quickly. I mean, if you're Bama, Kalen DeBoer comes in, first big matchup against Georgia. They win in heroic fashion. And then no offense to Vanderbilt because they're a different team, but you lost to the fat kid with asthma in the decathlon, right? And you're the 5-star prospect with the 6-pack abs and the hottest girl in schools in your car. So you look at Tennessee, thought maybe they won a game in a versatile way. They haven't been able to against Oklahoma, but it kind of looks like this may be who they are, as I brought up earlier, and that Nico isn't kind of developing as quickly as people in Tennessee had hoped. But we can go through all the different factors of Tennessee's ability to stop Jalen Milroe running the ball and understanding where Ryan Williams is in big situations, and then Tennessee on offense, taking shots down the field. I'll go back to what I said earlier. Tennessee's got to let this thing hang out, man. Like you got to go be yourself. Like you and live with the results. Because if you go again, if you try and play hide and seek with this Alabama team, it may work for a while. They may struggle to move the ball, but eventually Jalen Milroe and them are going to get you. They're too athletic not to. They're too talented not to. So if I'm Tennessee, like I said earlier, if I'm going to go down, I'm going down swinging my sword, man. We're going fast. We're pushing the ball down the field. That doesn't mean be stupid. You still make the right reads, but go out there with confidence offensively. And a lot of people are excited about, hey, it's weakness versus weakness. Let's see which one wins. Tennessee's offense versus Alabama's defense. I'm more excited about strength versus strength. I want to see this Tennessee defense against Jalen Milroe. How much zone coverage is Tennessee going to run? Because it gives Jalen a lot of problems, right? In man, it simplifies things. And when you motion, that's when you find out. That's why you motion a lot. Yeah, you want to out formation people, but you motion to find out what the coverage is. If the guy runs with my guy, it's man. If they spin down the safety to the other side, it's man. If not, it's probably zone. It's an identifier. That's what motion is. So expect a lot of motion from Alabama once again and Nick Sheridan early in this game. But if you're Tennessee, you got to let the big dog eat, man, and live with the results. Scared money don't make no money.
Jake, really intriguing game in Fayetteville as well. LSU goes to Arkansas, the battle for the Golden Boot. This feels like the perfect trap game, upset type of scenario. You just won a big game at home, emotional. Now you got to go on the road to play a rivalry. It does sound like Taylon Green is going to be good to go. My biggest question is this, Jake, and was there a few weeks ago, watched it in person. Can Arkansas play another clean football game? That really is, because they didn't do it before. They finally did it and pulled the upset over Tennessee. If they can do that, I think they can pull the upset, but I think that's a pretty big if in this game for the Hogs.
Well, the fascinating thing about Arkansas is if Taylon Green keeps throwing the ball well in these big games, this may be Bobby Petrino's Sistine Chapel. This may be his Mona Lisa or Starry Starry Night. Sorry, those are the only three paintings I know the name of. It could be his masterpiece because even earlier in the year against Oklahoma State, I thought he threw the ball really well. And then against UAB, he looked like he couldn't hit water if he fell out of a helicopter into the ocean. Then against Auburn, it wasn't great. But even, he made some throws against A&M, and then against Tennessee, I'm like, oh my God. Like, if this dude is doing that with the ability to run the way he can run and the size that Arkansas has in the backfield, this team is a legitimate problem. So I think this will solidify in everybody's mind whether or not Taylon Green is just one of those guys that rises to the occasion as a thrower in big games against an LSU defense that still has to prove it, Chris. I gave them their flowers earlier in the show, but they've got to prove it and show that this is the new norm. This isn't just an anomaly defensively. Now, on the other side, I thought Travis Williams pitched a perfect game against Tennessee. The amount of times that they run stunted up front and guessed right, whether that was slanting the right way, whether that was calling a pressure the opposite way of where Tennessee wanted to throw the ball or run the ball, and taking calculated risks. A lot of them, but he got away with a lot of them because he was right. I don't know if T-Will can pitch that perfect of a game again with what Nussmeier and LSU can do on offense. Maybe he can. But as far as Arkansas right now, you want to talk about, I think Sam Pittman's safe, right? But if he wins this one, he's safe by a mile. We don't even need to review it. You look at both coordinators they have. I think Travis Williams and Bobby Petrino have both done an incredible job. And this LSU team, they understand what they're getting. And this is a rivalry game. I don't think it's a trap game because it's a rivalry game. I think sometimes people forget that LSU and Arkansas is a rivalry game. So it's going to be fascinating. I think Arkansas shows up. I'm kind of leaning Arkansas right now, but whoever wins this game, including Arkansas, if LSU wins it, you are in an immaculate position with
Mhm.
Alabama coming to town to be able to make the SEC championship game. But if Arkansas wins this game, we've legitimately got to start talking about Arkansas having the possibility to finish the league with in the league with one loss. Nobody's schedule is incredibly easy down the stretch, but this is a huge let's move from the suburbs to an estate with a pool and a gate game for both of these teams. I can't wait to see which Taylon Green shows up and which LSU defense shows up.
Jacob, the rest of the slate, what intrigues you most? We got Mizzou hosting the Auburn Tigers. We've got Oklahoma and South Carolina. That's a game where both desperately need a win. Texas A&M goes into the house of horrors for them that is Starkville, Mississippi. And finally, Florida, Kentucky. Again, that's a game where boy, whoever loses that one is going to feel really, really poor about themselves. That could be the final game of Billy Napier's tenure, if we're being totally honest, with the bye week upcoming. So, of the ones I mentioned, what jumps out to you most? Obviously, I'm sure you're going to be keeping an eye on that Auburn game. I saw your brother talk about, am I crazy for thinking Auburn can win this weekend? And my answer to that would be, Jake, I don't think you're crazy at all, but why should I expect Auburn to do anything other than blow it at the end like they have the entire year?
Well, that's exactly what I said to him. Like, I would love to be on that. Dude, I'm from Lee County, Alabama. I was born in East Alabama Medical Center, the Auburn, Opelika area. My dad played at Auburn. I lived in Auburn for 11 years. I would love to get on here and talk about how badly I think Auburn's going to beat Mizzou. But what I'm more interested in is how Auburn's going to lose this one. It's incredible. I've never seen a team find a way to lose more games than this older group of Auburn leadership. It's amazing, right? It's sad, but it's still amazing. It's like you don't want to look at the train wreck as you're driving by, but I mean you kind of got to. You got to see it, see maybe what happened or how bad it is. So no, I have no faith in Auburn winning this game. In fact, they'll probably play good for 3.5 quarters. Like they did against Oklahoma, and find a way to lose it. Because listen, I'm a person that if you show me who you are enough, eventually I'm going to believe you. And I would love to be wrong. I would love to come back on here next week and be like, Chris, I can't believe it. Blaine, my brother, was right. He was right to have that feeling. But I don't, because I don't believe in this group. I believe in the young guys. I believe in the recruits that Hugh Freeze is bringing in and the plan long term. But this older group at Auburn, and they're great guys, I'm sure. I'm not saying they're bad people. They're probably going to be great fathers and great husbands, and that's what matters the most. But you've won nothing. You've accomplished, from a winning standpoint, nothing. In fact, the best thing you've probably done is show the younger guys how not to win. Because if I know what not to do, I know what to do. And I have no personal animus toward any of them. Again, I'm going to be rooting for them this Saturday on the road at Missouri. But go back over the last 4 years. What have you won? Who have you beaten? You haven't done anything. So why all of a sudden, halfway through the season when you're 2-4, am I going to sit there and be like, well, guys, guess what? Rumor has it they figured it out, right? They put liquid paper on a bee. It died, but they figured it out. I don't believe if you're Missouri, here comes the slump buster of the SEC, right? You're feeling down. The 9.5 turns you down once again at the bar. But here comes Big Stacy, right? She may be a 5. She may look like, one of the dwarves off the Rings of Power, but she makes a mean spaghetti. She's really funny, and you'll feel good about her. Her dad invented Pop-Tarts. They're rich. You'll feel good about yourself for about a week. All right, until you got to go back to the bar, and there's that 8.5, right? And you're going to go shoot your shot again. So, long story short, no, I don't have a feeling Auburn's going to win.
Jake, what's the other game that intrigues you the most? I mean, again, you got Florida, Kentucky, you've got Oklahoma, South Carolina. I feel like those two, unless you think A&M is going to get upset by Mississippi State, which, again, I know they've played tough there, but I got to think the Aggies. I think that's the game that's really going to these are the times where Texas A&M has blown it in the past. I think this is a new era with Mike Elko. I don't expect that, but
well, I want to see. I want to see if Connor Wegman can do what he did last week.
Yeah,
because oh boy, it came out. You want to talk about trust in the injury now? I mean, goodness gracious, either that or he found an infinity stone while he was sitting out for 3 weeks. Because that dude, not only throwing, he came out running too. If he does that, A&M's legit problem, like a legit problem. Because that defense is only getting better. So, Vandy's off, I believe. This weekend, I may
They
be
got
wrong.
they got
They
Ball
got Ball
State.
State. So
Yeah,
yeah, they're
which
off
is
this
which is
week.
basically being
Yeah,
off.
they're off
Yeah,
this week. Which is crazy to say for Vandy because you'd be like, oh, Ball State. I mean, here we go. Um, you could say Florida, Kentucky, just because it could be Billy's last game. I mean that game's probably going to be a slop fest
yeah.
to watch, which I've got no problem with a good defensive game. But yeah, I'm not outside of that. Oklahoma, South Carolina. Who can lose the game first? That's what that on offense.
Love
That's what
the
makes.
under.
I'll tell you this
Love
about
the
South
under.
Carolina too, though. Y'all got some cats running around on defense. Golly, y'all look good and they can run. Boy, y'all can run.
Jake Crain of Crain Company. Jake, always a pleasure. Last thing before I get you out of here. Thoughts on the fact that College Game Day might be in Nashville next weekend?
I love it. I absolutely love it. Listen, I
Little
gave Vandy
Vandy,
hell.
Texas. Little Vandy, Texas.
I gave
Maybe.
Vandy hell for the long, and you know what? They deserved it. But Clark Lee, Professor X, right, put on that helmet, saw the future, and it is just so unbelievably impressive. I'm so excited for those guys. I want to ask you this though, Chris. Do you think it's? I was talking to a guy I coached with. He's not in it anymore, like I'm not. But we were talking on the phone last night. Do you think the reason we're seeing like Vandy and Army and Navy and some of these other teams like really punch above their weight? Does it seem like they play harder than everybody else because they're not getting all this ULM, like getting all this NIL money? Like it's not, they're just out there just like, dude, we're not getting paid as much to do this. We're just going to play together and grind this thing out. Do you think there's any merit to that?
I think there might be a little bit extra chip on the shoulder, but I know you know this and agree with this, Jake. At the end of the day, when that emotion wears off, it comes down to, personnel and matchups. I mean, I just think from the Vandy standpoint, you add a gamer like Diego Pavia, man, and they run that
They're
offense they
pretty
run.
athletic. Like I
Yeah,
haven't
I mean,
seen Vandy this
Vanderbilt's a good
physically
team.
impressive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have to stop and just say Vanderbilt is a good
They
team.
are.
Like them following up that Alabama upset with the win at Kentucky. I'm not going to say that was a better win than beating Bama, but that was, I mean, it was everybody was expecting all week. All right, they're still
Yeah.
partying down on Broadway.
Well,
They're going to fall
and
flat on their
Chris, they
face.
beat Virginia Tech earlier in the year and then lost
Yeah,
to Georgia State. So it's not
yeah,
a
yeah,
crazy thing to think. What does
yeah.
Georgia State think right now? What a win.
Indeed, and I think Virginia Tech too is like, well, that loss wasn't too bad. I guess we're all
Hey,
right.
does Vandy have the best offense in the state of Tennessee?
Right now, yeah, I think so. We got to put some respect on that name. We have
Diego
to.
Pavia out here just
The
flipping the
legend.
narrative.
The legend. Jake Crain of Crain Company again. Jake, appreciate you taking the time as always, my friend. Let folks know in case they've been living under a rock where to check you guys out. What y'all got coming up?
Oh yeah, well look, it's if you watch our shows, it's Crain Company on YouTube. It's the easiest way to find us. CRAIN Company. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Roku, all the other things that I'm just not smart enough to
Smoke
understand.
signal, everything else.
Yeah, kaleidoscope. But no, we got
Josh Tate coming on today as well. Check that out. Going to be breaking out all the games 2 to 3:30 p.m. Central live. We have live calls as well, and we always hit the chat up. If you can't catch us live, it stays on demand. We're in the thick of it. Let's play a game of let's find out. Texas this weekend. Let's find out.
Jake, you the man. Appreciate you taking the time. We'll do it again next week.
always, buddy.